Hello and welcome. In this episode, we're all about Mitchelle Blair, strong contender for quite literally the worst parent ever and all-round evil bitch. Let's crack on. I'm William, and this is Dark Deeds. Our story takes place in Detroit, the capital of Michigan, located in the state's southeastern corner. Above all else, Detroit is famous for its car industry. Now a museum, the Ford Piquette plant was where Henry Ford mass-produced the world-famous Model T, the world's first affordable car. Detroit also has very close links with the arts and music. Motown was founded here, discovering stars like Marvin Gaye, Diana Ross, Stevie Wonder, and the King of Pop. Detroit is also the birthplace of techno, and before I get bombarded by angry Germans, don't blame me, blame Google. On the downside, as if once being the largest city in US history to file for bankruptcy and having an absolutely shit education system weren't bad enough, Detroit is absolutely not a safe place to live. If you've ever wanted to be murdered, raped, or robbed, then it's the destination for you. It's not quite Kill Central, but it's pretty damn close. And now, on to this week's Dark Deed. Early on Tuesday, the 24th of March, 2015, officers from the 38th District Court visited 800 Martin Luther King apartments to carry out the eviction of a Mitchelle Blair and her 4 children, who, despite several warnings, had fallen into rent arrears of over $2,000. After banging on the door several times and getting no answer, the officers forced entry. What they walked into is what could only be described as a shithole. Our Mitchelle clearly wasn't too big on housework. Not fazed, the officers got on with removing furniture and emptying out the apartment. Working their way through the property, it wasn't long before they found a freezer in the front room, placed behind a small chair. After trying to move it and finding it unusually heavy, they opened it to remove some of its contents. Court Officer Lee Gordon describes the scene. Of course, the police were called immediately. Once they arrived, it didn't take long to everyone's shock and horror to find a second body wrapped in a blanket hidden underneath the first. Police questioned the neighbors and were quickly able to hunt down Mitchelle. She'd been hiding at a friend's apartment with her 2 remaining children. Her words, as she was being taken away, were, "I'm sorry." As we'll see later, that wasn't strictly true. On Thursday, she was charged with child abuse and her bail set at $1 million. Yep, that's right. This psychotic woman gets caught with 2 dead children in her freezer and is charged with child abuse. Unfortunately for her though, that was all soon to change. The bodies of Stoney Blair, age 13, and Stephen Gage Berry, age 9, took 2 days to thaw before an autopsy could be performed. When completed, their injuries showed the full extent of the torture and suffering these children had endured. It was established that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the heads of both children, but the amount of scars, burns, chipped teeth, along with healed broken bones, and the malnourished state of their bodies showed that they'd been abused for years. Needless to say, Mitchelle's charges were immediately amended to 2 counts of felony murder, 2 counts of premeditated murder, and 1 count of torture. Due to Mitchelle's total lack of remorse and seeming not to give a shit that she was facing jail for the rest of her life without the possibility of parole, there were serious concerns raised as to her mental state and whether she was fit to stand trial. The judge refused her guilty plea until the court was sure she was competent. This decision did not sit well with Mitchelle. She rebuked the judge, stating that she'd already confessed 3 times. She also accused the prosecution of dragging her feet. The judge advised her to take a week to reconsider, while the court waited for 2 independent psychiatric reports.
Ms. Blair, how old are you?
36.
Are you a United States citizen?
Yes.
Okay. Before we get to the plea-taking procedure, I'd like to discuss the issue of competency here. I know last Friday you said that you had a number of issues with respect to the Shiner report.
Yes.
However, there already is a forensic center report that deems you competent to stand trial and proceed in this case. Mr. Harris, am I right in understanding you wish to object to the Shiner report in its entirety?
We wish to object to some of the facts that are identified in the Shiner report. We would accept the conclusion that she's competent to stand trial and competent to waive her Miranda and criminally responsible. Your Honor, may I hand you the documents that Ms. Blair has asked me to give to.
Mitchelle Angela Blair was born in Detroit on the 10th of May, 1979. We don't know much about her childhood, but from the information we have, we know it was pretty horrendous. Aside from living in poverty, Mitchelle was abused both physically by her mother through regular beatings and also sexually by a female family friend that still often visited them even after the incident. When a distressed Mitchelle told her mother about the abuse, the attitude she received was basically, "Yeah, and? It's over now. What do you want me to do about it?" This betrayal stayed with her and was the driving force to the horrific crimes she would later go on to commit. Skip forward a few years, and Mitchelle has 4 children from 2 different fathers: Gabrielle, Stoney, Stephen, and Matthew. To call the fathers deadbeats would be a kindness. Together, these useless bastards hadn't seen their kids in many, many months, and also owed a fucking incredible $50,000 in child support. Even though she got help from the state, Mitchelle always struggled with money. She would often borrow from friends and family or do the odd babysitting job. Yep, you heard right. I personally would rather leave my kids with a starving grizzly. In regards to her own children, State Child Protective Services had been to see her in both 2002 and 2005 to investigate claims of abuse and neglect, and on both occasions the claims held up, but for some reason she was able to retain custody and referred to counseling. How fucked up is that? Sometime later, the children just vanished from the education system. Stoney's absence in particular attracted the attention of one of her teachers. After weeks of non-attendance, he contacted the utterly useless Child Protective Services about Stoney, and was simply informed that a child not attending school was not neglect and nothing could be done about it. It turns out that in Michigan, you could pull your kids out of school for homeschooling and not have to contact any authorities or register with any departments. Makes you wonder how many other missing kids are being homeschooled. So at this point, you must be wondering what could possibly drive a mother to murder 2 of her children and store their bodies in a freezer. We jump ahead to mid-August 2012. Mitchelle returns home to find her youngest son, Matthew, playing with his dolls and putting them in suggestive sexual poses. Shocked and appalled, she demands to know why he's doing that with his toys. He replies that he learnt it from Stephen, who'd been doing that to him. After more questioning, Matthew goes on to reveal that Stephen had been raping and abusing him for months. Naturally, any parent being told that one of their children were being abused by a sibling would be shocking, and nobody could blame a parent for being overwhelmed with various emotions. However, there were any number of ways that Mitchelle could have handled this awful situation. She could have sat down with Stephen and spoken to him, or she could have questioned both her daughters to see if they'd had any knowledge or suspicions. She could have taken Matthew to a doctor to see if there were any evidence of rape, Or, more drastically, she could have called the police and let them get to the truth of the matter. Mitchelle went for the nuclear option. Please be aware that some of the details in Michelle's testimony are shocking and extremely disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Tell me what happened to Stephen.
I came home one day. My daughter Gabrielle, my oldest, met me at the door, and she's like, "Mom, come see what Maddie doing with his dials." And I'm like, "What is he doing?" He was making one dial, his little wrestle man, hump on top of the other. No, I'm like, "Maddie, why was you doing that?" I said, "Anybody ever do this to you?" He said, "No." I said, "Then why are you doing that?" And he said, "Yes, Stephen did." And I was like, so this is the first I'm hearing about that, period. This was 9 months before Stoney. Okay, Stoney wasn't downstairs, and she was always in the background. I wish to God I had questioned everybody together, but I didn't.
Would you say this was around August 30th, 2012?
No, this was before August 30th. August 30th is when he died.
Okay.
This was maybe a week and a half.
Before he died?
Yes.
Okay. So that, Matthew telling me that set off some action?
Yes, I went upstairs because Stephen was upstairs in his and Matthew's room. And I went upstairs and I said, "Stephen, Matthew said you was humping on him." And then Stephen stood up and he looked at me, and right then I could tell something was wrong in his face, because he was just like this. Any normal kid, I know my kid would have been like, "What?" That's not what he did. He stood up and looked at me like he had lost his mind, okay? And it just, hearing that from him had me fucked up in my head, period. But I asked him, I said, "Stephen, tell me the fucking truth. Was you humping on Matthew?" He said, "Yes, but that was all." And I said, "Did you hump on him with your underwear off?" He said, "No." Matthew yelled out, "Yes, he did." And I just remember going in the hallway, walking back and forth, like, and I walked back up and I was like, "You fucked your brother? You get what I'm saying? You fucked your brother." So I'm looking at them two. I'm looking at them like, what? I can't understand. So I start punching Stephen. You know, I'm like, "What the fuck is you doing to him?" I just start asking him questions. Matthew at this point is just spilling out. He's just spilling out. "And Mom, and he's doing like this, and he do this thing almost every night." He tell me how he was, the reason I put bags over Stephen's head is because if we had Maddie, I thought Maddie peed in the bed. My son was never a bed wetter. Didn't know it was Stephen waking up every morning pissing on Matthew like he was a damn piece of shit, okay? They had bunk beds. Stephen would get out the bed in the middle of the night. You would rape him in his own bed. You would pee on him instead of going to the bathroom. I'm waking up every morning thinking Matthew's a bedwetter. So we just wash him up and go, you a bedwetter.
Let's talk about what you did to Stephen.
The reason I put bags over Stephen's head is because my son told me that the plastic on his bed, because I thought he was a bedwetter, he said, "Sometimes, Mom, I couldn't breathe. Stephen was laying on me and he had my face down and the plastic on the bed. I couldn't breathe and he was humping on my butt like a basketball." That's when I got a garbage bag and started putting it over Stephen's head. And I started asking him, "Bitch, you know what I'm saying? You see what this feel like? You can't breathe? You stop at that's my son. You could not breathe on top of getting raped. You was 6 years old at the time. You get what I'm saying?" So I put the bags over his head. He lost consciousness. I did that a couple times. He told me that Maddie would be face down. He had stuff around his neck. So I grabbed Stephen, I grabbed a belt, and I put a belt around his neck, and I lifted him up like, "Do you like how this feels, being choked with a belt?" So I dropped him. I held him up until he lost consciousness as well.
You were intending to...
No, I did not intend to kill Stephen.
No, I'm not... Listen to my question. You were intending to inflict serious physical harm, but not kill him.
Definitely.
Okay. Did you also punch him?
Yes, I did. Multiple
also kick
times.
him?
Yes, I did.
You talked about choking him. Did you also burn him?
Yes, I did.
Okay, how did you do that?
Hot water, scalding hot water. In our bathroom, the hot water gets extremely hot. So, his private area, I stood him in the bathtub naked. You fucked up my son with your dick, you know? So yes, I threw hot water in his genital area multiple times. Multiple times. Every time Stephen peed in my son's eyes. He put his dick in his ears, his nose. He peed. Matthew even told me one time, "Mom, and in my eyes, it was gooey, but it wasn't pee. And right then, it was like, I didn't even know a 9-year-old could ejaculate. You get what I'm saying? So not only did you do that, you done it in my son's eyes. So my son had to go through all of this shit. So yes, I threw hot water on him repeatedly.
Did that make him burn?
Yes, it did. His skin came off.
Did you
His
also
skin
make
came
him
off.
drink Windex?
Yes, I did, because Matthew told me in the middle of the night he had took him in the basement and he made him drink the blue stuff from under the sink. And I'm like, what blue stuff? So I walked Maddie downstairs. He showed me what I said. You made Maddie drink fucking Windex. And then I went back to like years before, and I'm like, is this what was wrong with him? I thought Matthew had the stomach flu, where you vomit and have diarrhea. You get what, at the same time? At that time, this is what was going around. A lot of people had it, so this is what I thought Matthew had. He didn't. Stephen made him drink Windex. So yes, I made that boy drink Windex.
Okay, I'm just trying to clarify the record. Okay, again, you knew you were seriously harming him, but you didn't intend to murder him.
No.
Okay.
According to Blair, she felt remorse after unintentionally killing Stephen. Too bad this evil bitch didn't feel that 2 weeks earlier. She was apparently ready to turn herself in, but it was only due to Matthew's pleading of her not to that she instead chose to hide Stephen's body in the freezer. I can't begin to imagine the terror of the other children living in a house where your mother could freak out at any time and murder one of you. We fast forward to late May 2013. Mitchelle finds out from Matthew that Stoney has not only been continually raping and molesting him since Stephen died, she would also be doing the same to Stephen for years. Take a wild guess on how Mitchelle responded to that bit of news.
Miss Blair, what did you do to Stoney Blair that makes you guilty of premeditated murder?
She raped my son. I intentionally killed her.
How did you do that?
Starting from the beginning, when I found out about what Stoney was doing to Matthew, it was 9 months later after finding out about Stephen. So for the whole 9 months we were in the house, she was still raping my child. I did not know that. When I first found out, after Maddie told me, I took a minute because I was not understanding, that she did that to him, but I repeatedly punched her. On many occasions, my son, I told him to tell me every single thing she did to him. So as he was telling me more and more things that she did. I assaulted her every time he told me what she did to him. By assault, I mean I punched her. I have put a bag over her head till she lost consciousness. I threw hot water on her, scalding hot water from the faucet.
Did you hit her in the head with a wooden
Yes,
stick?
I hit her on her head multiple times, over and over.
Was that shortly before she died?
That was actually days before she died and the day she died.
Okay.
I hit on her back. It's like with her tailbone. I kicked her.
Okay, I just want to clarify a few things. And perhaps you don't know, but did this happen on or about May 25th, 2014? To the
May
best of your
May
recollection?
25th is actually the day she died. Well, the day I killed her.
And you said you killed her by putting a grocery bag over her head?
Yes, that day, Maddie would tell me different things because she was doing this to him for years, and I did not know that. You get what I'm saying? And I didn't find out till 9 months later. She had started with Stephen. She ruined my son, okay? She started with Stephen before he even started. So, yes, I put a bag over her head, but it got worse that day. Yes, I did. It got worse that day because Matthew would tell me how she would take her pad, her menstrual pad, and squeeze her blood out in his mouth, okay? And it was over with after that. It was over with.
You meant to kill her?
I definitely meant to kill her.
Okay. It wasn't an accident?
No, not at all. If I had a chance to do it again, I would.
When you went and got the grocery bag and suffocated her, that was your intent?
Yes. She was standing in the bathtub. I was throwing hot water on her. My son was standing to my right outside the bathroom door, and he was telling me everything he was telling me. I looked at her, and I'm like, "You did this?" And she was like, "Yes." So I actually had a stick, and I was hitting her in the head. Every time he told me something, I hit her very hard in her head, and I was throwing hot water on her. And when I actually took her out of the bathroom, I took her back in her room, and I just kept staring at her, and I said, excuse my language, but I'm like, "Why the fuck would you do this to him?" Just like, I'm constantly asking her. She kept saying, "I hate him." And I'm like, "You hate him?" And she admitted to me that she hated Gabrielle, she hated Stephen, she hated everybody. And I'm asking her why. She says, "Everybody always think Matthew's so cute." And I'm like, "So you fucked your brother?" Because you get what I'm saying. So I meant to. I definitely meant to.
On Friday, the 17th July 2015, Mitchell Blair was sentenced. As Michigan doesn't have the death penalty, she got life without the possibility of parole. 10 days later, she attended court again to have her parental rights stripped. Stephen Berry also had his rights removed. The two surviving children, Gabriella and Matthew, who both had watched their siblings being tortured and murdered, as well as listening to their screams of agony, not surprisingly had to undergo extensive counselling. Gabriella, who had been forced by Mitchelle to put Stoney's body in the freezer, was discovered to have burn marks all over her body from a curling iron and also a chipped front tooth. Despite her claim to have done all this to protect Matthew, he was discovered to have over 25 lash scars on his body, where he'd been beaten with an extension cord. Since escaping the clutches of their psychotic mother, the children have gone on to thrive. Gabriella graduated school and planned to go on to college, while Matthew was doing well in school and went on to be adopted. Michelle still shows absolutely no signs of remorse and still claims she was justified in killing them demons. While being in prison, she's been a total nutter. Within 2 days of being in jail, she was placed in isolation due to violent misconduct. She's been arrested over 25 times. Her party trick is to fill a Pringles can with her urine and feces, then throw the contents around like confetti at a wedding. I guess she'll have many more years to perfect that trick. In my opinion, the state of Michigan totally failed this family. It's clear that Mitchelle had deep psychological problems, probably arising from her abuse as a child. Admittedly, those kind of problems can be masked, but there can be no excuse for visiting the home twice, seeing its condition, along with beaten, malnourished children, and letting them stay there. At the very least, it should have caused concern and a welfare officer assigned to the children. When they dropped out of school, that should have raised loads of red flags, prompting officials to go and investigate immediately. I'm convinced that had the bodies of Stoney and Stephen not been discovered, she would have gone on to murder the other two eventually. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and leave comments and suggestions on any other dark deeds you'd like to see covered. Until the next time.